Welcome. This is the last of the lectures, last video for Unit 6. This is the last part of talking about art and power. So when we last left off, we were talking about how in different times we've seen artists, even though the rule is generally that artists are going to be focusing just on highlighting the most powerful and the most ideal, that periodically we do see where artists are looking at other people, like the poor, the downtrodden, the powerless, and we see that in both these examples from two very different time periods. Another thing related to that is that sometimes artists, for various reasons, feel like it's important to actually look at real people. Sometimes it's because artists feel like they need to have models, and real everyday poor people are the only people they can afford to hire as models. Although I think for Caravaggio it was maybe not just that. I think for him it was also that he was very faithfully trying to recreate the life of Jesus in some of these paintings and the life of these biblical scenes. And to him, they were already, as described in the Gospels, they were poor people, and working class people, and they shouldn't be depicted as royalty or as nobility. For Courbet, it was a more radical idea of just a sympathy for the working class, and so that to represent the working class was a way of challenging the authority of the state. Sometimes things become political unintentionally. In this particular painting, Veronese painted this painting, and it was originally intended to be a Last Supper painting, and then and it was titled Last Supper. It was in a monastery. The brothers, the monks who lived at that monastery, had hired Veronese to paint it. They were very pleased with the job he had done. And as part of the job, the thing that he was known for was throwing in lots of life, lots of fun things into the images of the paintings he made. So lots of details of different kinds of people. Like this little midget here. I think there's like a German type of soldier in there somewhere, and all kinds of people. And that was what Veronese was known for as as his product, the thing he sold, and it was part of the pleasure of the paintings. Well, anyway, so he's making this Last Supper, but he's also using it as an excuse to create all of those kind of fun things for the brothers to see in the painting. But then other people found out about the painting, and Veronese was brought to trial for heresy, for making a Last Supper that had all of these kind of irreligious elements to it. Veronese backed out of this problem kind of sneakily. He just changed the title of the piece and said, no, it wasn't a Last Supper. It was the feast at the house of Levi. Here's another two examples of political art. Jacques-Louis David is an important French painter of a neoclassicist, and he happened to live right in the period between the French Revolution, the beginning right before the French Revolution, and then the period after the French Revolution. And so we can see in his art different ways of thinking about making political statements. In this painting, he's making a very veiled political statement using an allegory related to classical history to make a statement about the importance of loyalty to ideals over the state. Whereas by the time we get here in later career for David, he's making a much more direct statement, just basically saying that it was a tragedy that Marat, one of the heroes of the French Revolution, or at least a hero to some, many thought he was too radical and dangerous, but Marat was assassinated by another radical, dangerous French revolutionary, and so David is making this painting to both to honor Marat, but also to make a statement about that the revolution should not give up on its ideals, and a much more direct kind of message, and less veiled in allegory. So here we have a work of protest that we've talked about already, right? The Raft of the Medusa. I think we're pretty familiar now with the story of the ship called the Medusa, and then the wreck, and then the people who were on the raft were out to sea for a very long time, and also the controversy related to this because of the fact that the France was still involved in both, because it was a controversy because it seemed to indicate that the corruption in France was leading to them doing a very bad job with their colonies, and this led to things like the shipwreck, but also because it raised consciousness about the fact that the French were still indirectly involved in the slave trade. And over here we have a political work of art that is about political protest itself, right? It is called Liberty Leading the People, but it's really a piece about the revolutions going on in Europe. It's imagining a street scene. And so the central figure is, of course, an allegorical figure, but all the other figures in the painting are in some ways referential to real everyday life type people. One of the things that artists frequently make a statement about when it comes to getting political is that many are not pleased with war. And I think no artist has done a better job than Goya in terms of just describing how futile and hopeless and horrific war can be. And he made a series of prints called The Disasters of War. Gruesome, but beautiful. The Chapman brothers made a sculpture piece not nearly as compelling, based off of it. So there are lots of ways to make anti-war pieces. We've already talked about Motherwell's Elegy to the Spanish Republic, and this is kind of an anti-war statement that's very personal and discreet and hard to read, kind of cryptic. Pablo Picasso's Guernica is much more straightforward. It's much more emotional. And Lichtenstein's is more confusing in terms of we're not even sure what, we can clearly read the painting. We know what the painting is describing, but it's not clear what the point of view of the artist is, how much this is being viewed as an anti-war piece, and how much it's just an excuse for some bright colors. We see a lot of political art in Germany post-World War II, and partially because artists in Germany really felt like they had to deal with the fact of post-World War II, right? They had to deal with the fact that what Germany attempted to do, the attempted, annihilation of an entire people, as well as the attempted conquest of all of Europe. And so, German artists have to, or many of them felt like they had to wrestle with that. Richter somewhat skips over that, but his artwork is also very political. This is one of a series of paintings that are about a group of protesters who were in the 60s who died in custody of the police. This painting, by the way, if you're not aware of it, I don't think I've gone over it, is an image of a gas oven from one of the concentration camps. So in the late 20th century, political art gets more cynical, more skeptical, more distant, and we see a lot of kinds of political artwork that is a little bit cryptic, hard to understand, and to figure out what is the actual political point of the piece. But nonetheless, I think it's important to understand that all of these are political works, and they all, if you spend the time, we don't have the time today to go over every single one of them, but each of them have things to say. But I do want to end talking about